The monks' cowls and tunics, their prayers and their daily routine had changed very little over the last 1,000 years. But Our Lady of Peace was not a Gothic cloistered place. Brother William, 30 years old and bleary with sleep, hung the bell pull back on its hook and left the belfry. He knelt in the chapel as the other monks arrived, footsteps echoing with the swishing sound of robes. What does the hesitation cut mean? In forensics, it refers to a previous attempt at suicide where you get a kind of jagged line or a less definite line than the one that has actually resulted in suicide. And in this book, I have a character named Lauren Wolfe, who is an extremely depressed and suicidal young poet. This time out, we're a long way from Algonquin Bay. This book is set in New York City, primarily in New York City. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is it's a psychological thriller, and New York is a very good city to be paranoid in, even now with all its Disneyfication and so on. It's very easy to feel that the world is out of control when you're in New York City. It's just so overwhelming. And I have at least 2 characters, maybe 3, who feel who are out of control in various ways. So I think it suited them much better than certainly than Northern Ontario, but even Toronto, because Toronto has, even though it's big, it feels pretty orderly. It's more like a who'll do what to whom in this case. In most thrillers, the threat comes from outside. It's some kind of physical threat. But in this one, it's really what's inside, not just one character, but 2 or 3 characters. So you don't know quite who's going to, as I say, do what to who, when. Graham Greene has this great line saying, people know of the sorrow that is in lust, but they don't think about the lust that can be in sorrow. And I think that's the case with this monk. He gets hung up, he sees that hesitation cut on Lauren's arm, and he's just lost. When I started, I knew things were going to go very wrong, and I had a particular idea of how they would go wrong. But as the characters developed, that changed from week to week as I wrote, as one character became kind of stronger or seemed more out of control than another. I mean, there's the monk character who ends up leaving the monastery, and he's extremely obsessed with Lauren, the poet, and she's suicidal and also extremely angry, gets extremely angry with him and another man in the book who develops later on, a guy named Mick, who's a drug dealer, motorcycle riding kind of loose cannon who brings violence into their lives, and you just don't know. I ended up not knowing what was going to happen until very near the end. Unlike the Cardinal novels, this one doesn't have somebody who's going to make everything all right. And that does make you feel all at sea, and I think that's part of why at least 2 of the characters feel quite lost. They lose their moral center and lose their judgment. Brother William has a real brother in the real world in New York who was a police officer for a time and quit that and ended up becoming a parole officer, and he's the guy that William goes to when he leaves the monastery for the big city. And the book goes into their background a little bit. They were both orphaned in a sad way. Well, it's always sad, but in a particularly bad way when they were very young. And it was interesting to explore the completely divergent ways they respond to that and to their extremely difficult father. Dominic, the cop, responds with complete defiance, and Peter, as he was then known, responds with complete compliance. He's a very obedient, law-abiding kind of guy. And yet you feel there's a deep kinship between them, and they sense it between themselves, although they're always at odds with each other. And I think it makes an interesting contrast. And Dominic provides another kind of loose cannon. You don't quite know where he's going to go. I associate a lot of my books with music, and in this case, the song it most reminds me of is one by Pink Floyd called "Careful with That Axe, Eugene."